Yeah, good morning to everybody. This is a very special occasion that a group of 10 United Nations human rights experts came to Taiwan in order to review 3 documents, a core document prepared by the government of Taiwan and 2 reports, one of the implementation of the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and the second, implementation of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. In addition, we received quite a high number of so-called shadow reports by various non-governmental organizations, and we also have provided list of issues that we deem to be most important for the discussion during the coming days. And again, we received comprehensive replies both by government but also by the NGO community to these list of issues. So that will facilitate, I am sure, a very interesting and constructive dialogue that we will hold the coming days, primarily, of course, with representatives of the government, but also very much with the NGO community, and this morning also with the parliamentary cross-party group. I would like to start by a short round of introduction so that you know who we are. And then I would like also to ask the members of the parliamentary cross-party group whether they would also present themselves, because they have asked for this meeting, but we thought it's a good idea to also invite the civil society, the NGO community, to complement also this meeting this morning. My name is Manfred Nowak. I am a professor of international law and human rights at Vienna University and director of the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute of Human Rights. And among my various UN functions, the most well-known is that I served as United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture between 2004 and 2010. And I will be also the coordinator of the committee that is reviewing the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And I pass on to Eibe Riedel, the other coordinators.
Thank you, Manfred. First of all, a very warm welcome on my behalf as well. Eibe Riedel, I'm professor of international law and human rights law at the University of Mannheim in Germany and the Swiss chair of human rights until the end of last year. But they have asked me to continue to do this. I was a member of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights for 14 years. And just a small correction, Manfred. We are not UN experts here. We are not invited as UN experts, but we are invited as independent experts. Most of us have had functions in the UN or still ongoing functions, but our role here is primarily to be expert. So as Manfred has said, we're going to do something which is really quite extraordinary. We're going to have meetings of 2 groups at the same time, and today both groups together, civil and political and economic, social and cultural rights. And you all know the reasons why, because Taiwan joined both these covenants, and therefore it's very important that we see it together. But we will then divide as from tomorrow into the 2 groups, but in the end we will come together again. And I will be looking with my colleagues from the economic, social and cultural rights field. But let me just say one more word by way of introduction, and that is to express on behalf of the entire group my deep felt gratitude and admiration for Ming Li Kuo and his team And also Yu Huang, who picked me up at the unearthly hour at 6 o'clock this morning at the airport, and to get me through the things without any hitches. So that was very, very, very good. And we feel extremely well served by and independently, leaving it entirely to us to decide what we do with all the masses of information we got. But Ming Li has been extremely kind in providing it in the past months, without which we could not have done it. In fact, it's even better than what the Office of the High Commission does to the treaty bodies. That said, I hand over to Philip Alston, my friend.
Thanks, Eibe. My name is Philip Alston. I'm a professor of law at New York University. Like my colleague Jerry Cohen, I was the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions, like my colleague Asma Jahangir. And for 8 years, I chaired the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, like my colleague Virginia Dandan. So I've done nothing original.
My name is Theo van Boven. I'm a national of the Netherlands, and I'm pleased to meet you here. I have a long history in the United Nations. The first United Nations meeting I attended was, I think, before many of you were born. That was in 1962. In fact, since then, I have all along been associated with the United Nations in many different capacities, just as director of the Division of Human Rights, when some also cooperated with me. I was also the predecessor of Manfred Nowak as Special Rapporteur on Torture, and I served also in the 90s on the committee as a member on the treaty body on the elimination of racial discrimination. So I look forward working with you all, and this is a fascinating exercise, and I think it could also serve as a model to the United Nations. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Virginia Dandan. I'm Filipino, and presently I am the UN Independent Expert on Human Rights and International Solidarity. I was chairperson of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, following in the footsteps of Philip Alston for 8 years, but a member of the committee for 2 decades, 20 years. That's a long time in one's lifetime. But I think the most important part of what I have to say is that I'm not a lawyer. I'm an artist. So there you go. So you have a plethora of personalities before you today, and we are here in our individual capacities. In spite of all the titles you have just heard, we are still here as independent experts in our personal individual capacities, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having organized this, and thank you to everyone who has been so kind to us.
大家好. My name is Heisoo Shin from Korea. I've been working within NGO community for some 35 years, more than 35 years. Although I was a professor, full-time professor for 7 years, I resigned because I was so busy involved in the practical promotion and protection of human rights. Currently, I'm teaching at the Ewha Women's University, Graduate School of International Studies, as an adjunct professor. And also, I'm representing a human rights NGO in Korea called Kokun, Korea Center for UN Human Rights Policy, which aims to implement the UN human rights standards and then be a liaison between the UN and Korean context. I'm a current member of the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, but as introduced in the beginning, I'm not here as a member of the committee, but as a person with individual capacity. I have to emphasize that I don't represent the committee, and this is truly a personal involvement. I'm very happy to be here because I was here also a few years ago to review the Taiwan's implementation of the CEDAW Convention as a former CEDAW member. So happy to see you all, and thank you very much for your hospitality.
Yeah. Now we start with the members of the group which will deal with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Because of ABC, I have to speak first. My name is Nisuke Ando, ANDO, which is very easy to remember, I hope. I am now the Professor Emeritus of Kyoto University and also the Director of Kyoto Human Rights Research Center. I served as a member of the Human Rights Committee under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights for 20 years, much too long. Also chairperson of the same committee between 1993 and 94. Now, when this project was started, I thought it was really wonderful, not only for the people of Taiwan, but for the rest of the world, including your people on mainland China, because, well, everyone can see how democracy is mature and working well. And what you need is sort of international perspective, which we try to help you. And well, whichever contribution I can make for that purpose, I should be very, very happy. Thank you.
My name is Cohen, Jerry Cohen. I've been to Taiwan many times. I'm from NYU Law School, where I teach about international and comparative law and co-direct the U.S.-Asia Law Institute. This is a very exciting venture, and I congratulate all who have been involved in this. When I first came here 52 years ago, nothing could have been more inconceivable than this kind of human rights exercise. So I congratulate you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shanthi Dairiam, and I live and work in Malaysia. I have been a women's human rights advocate for more than 30 years, both nationally in Malaysia as well as internationally. I founded the International Women's Rights Action Watch for the Asia and the Pacific, which is based in Malaysia, and it's dedicated to the promotion and the monitoring of the implementation of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. And my organization, which I founded in 1993, currently has links with women's groups in more than 140 countries of the world. Very recently, there was a visit from the Women's Commission here to my office in Malaysia, and they've had discussions on work on CEDAW that can be initiated here, and I hope to see a follow-up to that visit, and I'm looking forward to that. I also served as a member of the CEDAW committee and was its rapporteur 2004 to 2008. This exercise really excited me when I was invited to be on it. It's very unprecedented. I've never heard of anything like this happening. And as someone else has already said, we hope it will be a model for even how the UN treaty bodies do their work. So congratulations to everyone here and to this country for having initiated such an exercise, and I look forward to the rest of the days of work here.
My name is Asma Jahangir. I am from Pakistan, so I am familiar with martial laws and post-martial law periods. And as Philip said, what can we say which the others have not experienced? I have been many times under arrest and in prison, so I don't think that any of my other 10 colleagues have had this good opportunity. I have been an activist in my own country and was special rapporteur of extrajudicial killings. My successor was Philip Alston, and then I was special rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. Other than that, I founded the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, which continues to be a very well-respected organization even today. I worked with the women's organizations and bonded labor organizations in Pakistan. Thank you. And by profession, I am a lawyer. I also headed the Supreme Court Bar Association of Pakistan. Thank you.
So I hope that you are convinced now that this is a group of eminent United Nations experts, in the sense of human rights experts who know a lot about the United Nations and have experience in various respects, having worked or partly are still working for any of the independent United Nations expert bodies. At the same time, and I would like to stress this at the beginning, we are not there to interfere in whatever way into the internal affairs of Taiwan, as was suggested quite often in the preparation. We are there on the invitation of the government to assist the government in implementing their international to bring the international human rights standards into the domestic legal system of Taiwan. And in that respect, of course, the legislative yuan plays a very important role, and we are very pleased that this first meeting takes place with the parliamentary cross-party group, and I would be happy if the representatives of this group would also like to introduce themselves and also explain a bit more what the parliamentary cross-party group is doing, has done already in relation to the implementation of both covenants. Whom may I give the floor? Please.
I will speak in Chinese, so please hear me. 我们的主席 Dr. Nowak and all the independent experts, good morning. I am a DPP legislator, You Mei-Nu. I'm also the chair of the Parliamentary Cross-Party Group on International Human Rights. I just returned from El Salvador because I was there to visit a women human rights group. I just came back 6 a.m. this morning. Suffering some jet lag. However, I see that you just arrived in Taiwan yesterday too, and you are about to start a 5-day review committee. This is truly plausible. Thank you very much. And I think your staunch support for human rights help you to forget about how tired you are or we are. And therefore, I want to thank you for coming to Taiwan to participate in this review process. I have been engaged in women's rights promotion activities for more than 30 years. I am a lawyer for more than 30 years. I have been the head of a bar association in Taiwan for many years as well. It is truly an honor to be part of this review meeting, and this is the first time after Taiwan ratified the 2 covenants that Taiwan submitted and a national human rights reports and invite independent experts to come to Taiwan to review the two covenants. It is indeed a historical moment. Thank you very much for coming again.
In fact, in the past, I worked with private women's groups to promote the ratification of CEDAW. And in 2007, the President, Mr. Chen Shui-bian, ratified the CEDAW. And in 2009, we also presented a national report on CEDAW. I remember the President Ma Ying-jeou in this administration also invited international independent experts to provide independent concluding observations for the government's reference. However, it is a pity that these advice did not get incorporated in government policies. We hope that this time history will not repeat itself. Of course, we all understand that the review that went on back in 2009 was not as complete and comprehensive as what we are having right here. So we do have high hopes for the review results of this time. And as a legislator, it is my hope that we can also do our part in the legislative yuan to fulfill and implement all the concluding remarks provided by the independent experts. We have also seen that all the experts have read thoroughly our national reports and proposed 124 issues in the LOI. These issues covered not only content related to the two covenants, but also pinpointed some structural problems Taiwan has in human rights protection. I believe the list of issues will help us to promote human rights protection further. Taiwan is not a member of the UN, so despite the fact that we have ratified the two covenants, we have not been able to make our voices heard in this area by the international community. So we really look forward to the constructive comments from the panel of experts here. At this point of time, I would like to point out some barriers we may face in Taiwan in implementing the two covenants. First of all, we don't have a dedicated national human rights institution. The government has not yet appointed a national human rights institution in accordance with the Paris Principles. So, as we go through the review process today and tomorrow, we are also going to hear comments from many representatives of NGOs. However, throughout the process, we cannot find one single dedicated human rights institution to speak. During the next session of the Legislative Yuan, in fact, in the previous session of the Legislative Yuan, we actually asked the Presidential Human Rights Advisory Committee and the Ministry of Justice to come to the Legislative Yuan to talk about how we have been preparing for the review. However, it seems that either the Advisory Committee or the Ministry of Justice said that they were not really in the position to take charge of the issue. As a result, so we demanded that there should be one particular team in charge of the matter, but the MOJ said it's not the one, and the Presidential Human Rights Advisory Committee said it's not the one either. In the end, government told us that the Presidential Human Rights Advisory Committee would delegate a 7-member task force to be in charge of the International Review and Consultation Committee. However, this is an ad hoc task force, so we are worried maybe everything will go back to the way it was after the review process. This is something we are really worried about. So when will we have a national institution of human rights following the Paris principles? Without such an institution, we will not have dedicated staff and budget. Not to mention the secretariat assigned for this review project is at a very low ranking. So when the Ministry of Justice asked other government agencies to provide data, many of these government agencies were not willing to cooperate. So this is the first barrier we face right now. Secondly, in the Legislative Yuan, we don't yet have a special committee on human rights. Right now, we have 8 separate independent committees. Among the 8 committees, there's no one specifically dedicated to human rights protection. And as I said, we do not have a national institution for human rights. That's another barrier we face. So in the Legislative Yuan, who is there to oversee and monitor the implementation of the 2 covenants in the government? That is exactly why I established the Parliamentary Cross-Party Group on International Human Rights in the Legislative Yuan last year. I hope that with this group in place, we will be able to pay closer attention to the implementation of the 3 UN covenants, and we will be engaged with the international community on these matters more extensively going forward. So this is some preliminary effort we have been making in the Legislative Yuan. And actually, during my visit to the Central Americas, I visited the committee members in charge of these matters in those countries. I think it is essential that the links are built between the legislative body and these human rights promotion groups and organizations. I believe we together will be able to monitor the progress made by government in promoting human rights. It is my sincere hope that this cross-party group will be able to make its contribution. The third barrier we face in promoting human rights in Taiwan is that many government employees and civil servants do not have a clear understanding of the importance of human rights. Right now, we have many representatives from different NGOs representing the civil society and the vigor of Taiwan's civil society. As a result, very often, the promotion of human rights in Taiwan has not been done in a top-down approach. Rather, it's a bottom-up approach, thanks to the efforts from the civil society. It is regrettable that the civil servants and government employees, due to the lack of education in their formative years, do not have a clear understanding and sufficient knowledge about human rights. As a result, despite the efforts we make in the Legislative Yuan to enact human rights protection laws, including the Prevention Act of Sexual Aggression, Sexual Assault, and the Prevention Act of Domestic Violence, as well as the acts against discrimination against different ethnic groups. Discrimination in workplace and many different contexts is still commonplace. I'll give you one example. Right now, Taiwan has not legalized marriage between people of the same sex. The rights and interests of gay and lesbian couples are not properly protected as a result. And as we reviewed the 2 covenants, the law on assembly rights should have been amended, but it has not happened yet. And we know that death row prisoners should have the right to ask for an amnesty or commutation from the president. But because of the insufficient implementation of the government, right now the death sentence is still being implemented and carried out in Taiwan. The government said that we do not have the Commutation Act in place for the death row prisoners. That's why we have to carry out the execution according to law. Again, I think this is a testament to the insufficient knowledge of our civil servants. I think it is essential that we have to strengthen our government employees' knowledge and understanding of human rights and gender equality. It is my hope that in the review process, the panel of experts can provide us with concrete suggestions and advice so that the civil groups as well as the legislators can have something to base on in their efforts to promote human rights. Once again, I thank you for your hard work and I thank you for your commitment to protecting human rights. Thank you.
Ask a follow-up question to your excellent expose of the situation in Taiwan, which will help us a great deal. Of course, we have lots of materials, but you summarized it beautifully. As a member of the German National Human Rights Institute and chairing the board of trustees, we've had enormous disputes on what type of issues the National Human Rights institution should deal with. As we all know, there are at least 4 different models of national human rights institutions. And the Germans have said, no, we don't go down the track of petitions, individual cases. We'll go down the agenda-setting track. So according to the Paris principle, the institute decides itself what issue to take out, where there's a burning issue, and then deals with it in extenso for maybe 2 years, and then picks up other topics. And this way can only do 3 or 4. Reason being, that you can do with an institute with about 50 collaborators in the institute. If you have individual communications, you would need 150, and nobody's prepared to pay for that. What do you think? What is your vision of the Taiwanese National Human Rights Institution once you get it?
大灾问哈其实这个问
This is really a big question. We have similar debate here in Taiwan. In fact, during the former President Chen's administration, we had such debate as to how and whether we wanted to have a national human rights institution. In Taiwan, we have a control yuan, which claims that it is also dealing with human rights issues. That's why we have to decide what matters should be taken care of or handled by the National Human Rights Institution, and to whom should the institution report, the control yuan or the president. Our vision is that the institution should be responsible for investigating human rights related cases. So the institution may organize public hearings, and if a government employee has infringed upon someone's human rights, then the case may be moved to the judicial system or the Ministry of Justice. In other words, the institution doesn't do all the work on its own, but the institution should have the right to look into human rights violation cases. Of course, we also wonder whether this is the appropriate approach.
The members of the parliamentary cross-party group who would like to address.
Thank you. I am Bi Kim Hsiao. I'm the other member of the Legislative Yuan who is here today. I'm also, like Legislator Yo, I'm a member of the Democratic Progressive Party, and I have been asked by my party to convey the personal welcome of our chairman to all of you. We would like to express our appreciation for your coming to Taiwan and for taking part in this process of independently reviewing Taiwan's human rights standards. I think this is a very important effort since our ratification of the CEDAW Convention, even though regrettably the United Nations does not recognize or accept Taiwan's ratification. Yet your presence here is, I believe, important to further improve Taiwan's human rights situation and giving us suggestions on how to comply further with international human rights standards. Indeed, our situation here has improved significantly since the end of martial law in 1987. However, there are still some more areas where we can further improve our human rights here, and some of the issues are well known to you, as demonstrated in the questions that you have already raised and also in our government's report. But I just want to highlight a few issues that I have been working on in the legislature at the moment. I would like to share these with you, and I do believe that these issues warrant further attention. First is the area of immigrant rights and the nationality issues. The issue of immigration is new to Taiwan because it wasn't until the 1990s that we began to have an inflow of immigration. The local and central government have allotted resources to support our new immigrants, the majority being women coming from Southeast Asia through marriage. This is the majority of our new immigrants. But they still face some unfair laws and practices that need to be addressed. The first is that naturalized citizens or new immigrants, while having the right to vote, they are deprived of the right to run for any level of public office, including local village and township elections for the first 10 years after obtaining their citizenship. As a consequence, for example, there are some villages in rural Taiwan where we have large populations of citizens of Vietnamese or Indonesian descent, yet they cannot run for the head of the village or take part in the local governance of their area. We think that this is a violation or deprivation of their civil and political rights, and this is something that I seek to address, and I have proposed legal changes in our election law that would address this, and we are working on that. A second area related to immigration and nationality is I believe our current nationality law is discriminatory. While we allow Taiwan citizens to obtain foreign nationality and maintain dual or multiple citizenship, for example, our president's daughters have dual Taiwanese and U.S. citizenship, and that is allowed. However, our law does not allow citizens of foreign origin to have dual citizenship once they naturalize or in the process of obtaining Taiwan citizenship, and I believe this is discrimination. We make the renouncing, our legal system requires people of foreign origin to first renounce their foreign citizenship as a precondition for entering the process of naturalization of Taiwan citizenship. And as a consequence, there have been many cases of residents who forfeit their foreign nationality years before obtaining their local nationality, and in the process becoming stateless. And if any legal complication arises, such as divorce or family violence or loss of the legal the marriage or family dependency in Taiwan, they've lost their other nationality and they become stateless. And there are many cases like this here in Taiwan. And we also hope to address this. I have proposed legislation to eliminate the requirement of submitting proof of loss of original nationality in the immigration and naturalization process. Unfortunately, government officials who have attended my public hearing on this matter have rejected this proposal so far. A second major area I'm working on is the refugee and asylum issue in Taiwan. I have proposed a refugee law which would provide a legal framework for asylum seekers in Taiwan in accordance with international standards. Unfortunately, unlike other legislation that normally goes through a process of review and debate, discussion in the committees, my refugee law has been blocked from the agenda by legislators of the governing party a total of 24 times over the past year, in the procedure committee and in the plenary meetings combined, preventing the legislation from even having a chance to be discussed and debated in the committee. While the government claims that it has proposed its own alternative version of a refugee law, the version that they have proposed specifically excludes asylum seekers from China and Tibet. Now, since most asylum seekers in Taiwan are political refugees from China, of Chinese and Tibetan origin, I believe that excluding them from the legal framework for political refugees would make such a law meaningless. And neither would it resolve the existing pressing matter of providing asylum and legal working rights to those refugees who are already here residing in Taiwan. So this is something we also need to work on. I've also been actively working on the legalization of same-sex marriage and providing more rights to people of different sexual orientation, which currently is deprived. Although our current law prevents discrimination based on sexual orientation in the education system, also in the working place, but implementation of the current legislation also requires improvement. I've also been working on the rights of indigenous people and also the phenomenon, especially in rural and indigenous communities where children are not living with their parents because their parents have to migrate to the urban areas, leaving children and old people in the rural areas. And most of our schools in these villages have over half or even up to 2/3 of their children who are living without parents. And I think this is a social and economic issue that we also need to address here in Taiwan. There are a number of other issues, but we have many NGOs here who will also present these issues. I will not go into further detail, but I know one matter that has been constantly raised, especially by visitors from the European Union, is the matter of the death penalty in Taiwan. Within our society, there is not a clear consensus on how to proceed with this. But when my party, when we were in government, we imposed a moratorium on executions to give our society more time to discuss and to build consensus in the direction of eliminating the death penalty. However, this moratorium is no longer effective, obviously, as there have been many executions over the past few years. So this is something that we also are still discussing within our society, and hopefully with more education there will be also greater consensus on where to go on this. But finally, as our time is limited and there are many other people who want to present and share some information here, I want to raise the situation of our former president and the lack of independence in our judicial system here in Taiwan. Our former president has been incarcerated for over 4 years over corruption charges since the change of government in 2008. Now, there have been many controversies surrounding his trial, including a pre-trial detention, or in other words, he was not presumed innocent. He was detained and incarcerated for months prior to the trial. The judge who ruled him free of detention was immediately replaced by another judge who detained him throughout the trial process. Also, a key witness who was accused of bribing the former president's family admitted that prosecutors asked him to make false testimony about the bribery. Now, these incidents lead us to believe that our former president did not have a fair trial. The second matter related to his situation is that in violation of Article 10 of the Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, throughout his incarceration, Chen has not been treated humanely. For nearly 4 years, he was confined to a very small cell that he shared with another inmate, deprived of a table, a chair, or even a bed, and the surveillance camera positioned right above his toilet. And as a result of having to read and write squatting on the floor, without a chair and table, and being deprived of the option of socializing and working with other prisoners in the prison factory, our former president has developed serious physical and mental illnesses. Last November, he was hospitalized over severe urinary infections. And I visited him in the hospital, and he claims that his urinary problems are partly a result of the monitoring surveillance camera positioned right next to the toilet. And he believes psychologically it makes it very difficult for him to exercise his humane physical functions. But his situation or his treatment and unfair trial is not a single case. Other former government officials of the DPP have been subjected to legal persecution. Since 2008, the change in government, dozens of former DPP officials and staff have been investigated, interrogated, or detained and prosecuted. The former Secretary General or Chief of Staff to our President, for example, he was detained for over 50 days without trial over allegations which only 4 years later or just recently have been completely exonerated. The 4 cases against him have all been dismissed and acquitted. And also in 2008, 2 local DPP magistrates were also detained without trial and have only recently been through the tormenting 4-year legal process and been exonerated of their allegations after years of agony and torment. So I want to raise these cases as I believe that illustrates the problem of the politicization of the judiciary, where individuals with opposing political views are not treated fairly in our judicial system. And before we end, I just want to also say that although we are still debating in the legal and legislative process now the laws and regulations regarding media, the media management and in Taiwan, there have been a number of concerns about the potential monopoly of the media in Taiwan, and especially with influence, with that financial influence coming from China affecting the content of our media. And this is, we are working with the NGOs and students to create a legal framework that would prevent the hard-won media and freedom of speech that we have gained in Taiwan over the years from being compromised by a potential media monopoly. And so this is something we are still also working on. But of course, since time is limited, I will stop right there. But again, I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to apologize for having to leave shortly after my presentation because of a conflicting meeting schedule in the Parliament. But again, my appreciation for all of you for making this personal effort to take part in this independent review to help improve and create progress in our human rights in Taiwan. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much for your presentation. Again, are there other members of the cross-party parliamentary group? So the other parties?
I'm sorry, I want to explain that we were only given a few hours by our Justice Ministry from notification to a deadline to apply for the opportunity to speak here. So while many other legislators are interested in joining, but they were not aware as we were in recess, given only a few hours to apply to speak today. So there are only the 2 of us here. But there is certainly more interest, and we hope there will be future opportunities for others to take part.
Thanks very much, Philip Olsen.
I just have a quick question. The issue you've raised about the conditions of detention of the former president obviously raise serious concerns, but to the extent that these are the normal conditions of detention, is it your position then that inhumane practices prevail throughout the prison system?
I'd just like to briefly explain that there are different types of prison cells, and some cells, like our former presidents, do not have a table or a chair, and they do all their functions on the floor. But there are other prison cells that do have bunk beds or beds, and of course we hope that his case also highlights the general condition in our prisons, so that the incarceration or the loss of liberty is the only punishment, or that that our prison facilities are there to facilitate the rehabilitation or the ultimate, once our prisoners are released, that they are able to join the rest of our society as law-abiding citizens.
Thank you. I have Asma Jahangir and then Jerry Cohen.
Just a very brief question. You talked about the lack of independence of judiciary, but at the same time you also said that a number of your party people were exonerated eventually, and that must have been through the judicial process. So I just want to be very clear of the lack of independence, or of how it is, as you said, it's a politicized judiciary, and then how is it possible that eventually they do exonerate people from the opposition?
Of course, by and large, we are a country that has to be under the rule of law. What has happened is that members of the opposition are first detained before there is adequate evidence of a case built against them. And so in the process of detaining them, it tarnishes the image. It's like an allegation that someone has done something wrong, or if we are called into interrogation or questioning, and that is made public to the press, that we are accused of, for example, accused of corruption, that 5 years later is completely exonerated. We have lost 5 years spending time constantly in the courts, and also our political careers are affected significantly. Of course, this is within the legal framework, but the gesture of making these arrests, detentions, before there is adequate evidence or to back up the allegations or the charges, and also the pre-trial detention of people who are not posing a danger to society, mostly government officials or magistrates or former staff members of the government, we believe is also an abuse of the legal system that indicates to us politicization of the process.
Thank you. Jerry Cohen.
Thank you for that excellent summary. And of course, the problems you raise are very complicated. I take it some of them are in the process of being dealt with at the moment, such as the attempt to see whether you should strengthen your antitrust law in terms of the threat to a free media. Others are also underway of being considered. Criminal justice is so complex. One is, I agree with you, and I was a prosecutor for a while in Washington. The power to indict is the power to destroy or to severely damage. And I hope there will be progress made in providing some protections against promiscuous indictment. But of course, not only your party has suffered from that, even your president was subjected to a long process of 3 trials before he ascended to the presidency. And as you point out, the courts often, if belatedly, acquit. And yet you say there's no judicial independence. One has to inquire if they convict a former president of many charges of corruption. Is that an exercise in judicial autonomy? If they acquit others of similar charges, is that an exercise of judicial autonomy? I think this is a subject that is a very complicated one. I certainly agree with the progress in the Speedy Trial Act in terms of reducing the occasions for prosecutors having the right to appeal acquittals. But I think it should go further, and I hope your process will further limit the number of trials, the number of appeals. This has proved to be a nightmare for people who, as you suggest, sometimes didn't deserve that kind of treatment. But these are very complicated questions. Look at the question of detention. Should there be a prosecution is one question. And second, if a person is indicted, should that person be detained, given the huge disadvantage that subjects the accused to and the personal hardship? Finally, I think you're quite right about the terrible conditions in your prison system. And former President Chun's case illustrates that when the government maintains he's receiving equal treatment to others, that makes you focus on what is that equal treatment. On the other hand, someone from America like myself can't be in the position of being hypocritically hypercritical when we have hugely unfortunate prison conditions, as the well-known situation in California has demonstrated. So where do you leave us on all this? Do you leave us with the view that the process of reform is grinding its gears too slowly? What can we be left with? You have a democratic system. It's working. It's painfully slow in many cases, but can you generalize before you leave us?
Well, I just want to say that all of the